I looked into an antique mirror. It showed me doing something I hadn't done yet, and every time I checked again, a memory of my past disappeared, including the ones I loved most. I guess the whole thing began on a cloudy afternoon when the town felt like it was holding its breath and I felt like I was drifting through the day without really touching it. I had wandered into the antique shop because the sign outside kept swinging in the wind, tapping, tap, tapping, as if calling me in. And I remember thinking that anything was better than going home to the quiet. I always pretended not to hear. The shop smelled like dust and forgotten perfume. And the moment I stepped inside, something in me tightened like a memory trying to surface, but not quite rising. I walked past shelves of porcelain dolls and chipped teacups and stacks of old letters tied with faded ribbon, and none of them felt like they were meant for me until I saw it leaning against the far wall, wrapped in a velvet cloth the color of dried roses. The mirror. Even before the owner shuffled toward me with his careful steps and his half-closed eyes, I felt the mirror pulling me the way a dream pulls you in before you know it's a dream. He told me it was from an estate auction, and that it had been locked in an attic for decades, and that no one had wanted it because no one needed a mirror that tall and heavy anymore. But his words felt like they were floating somewhere far away behind a curtain of static. Because the moment he uncovered the mirror, I swear the air around me shifted. It was ornate and old and framed with dark curling wood that looked almost alive. The kind of wood that holds stories in its grain, and the glass shimmered strangely. Not like modern clean glass, but like the surface of a lake at dusk, reflecting light that shouldn't be there. The strange thing was that it didn't scare me. Not at first. It made me feel seen, like it understood something about me I didn't say out loud. I bought it without thinking, without questioning, without asking why my chest felt warm when I touched the frame. And the owner gave me this long, searching look before whispering, "Take care of what you see." Sometimes reflections are more honest than we are, but I didn't understand him not then. When I brought the mirror home, I set it in the hallway where the light from my window fell across it in a soft, pale sheet. And for a while, I just stood there letting my reflection settle into place. I looked tired and a little lost. My hair messy, my clothes rumpled from the wind, but it was still me, at least I thought it was. Then the light flickered just a little, and my reflection blinked a moment later than I did, barely noticeable, except that I felt it like a cold touch down my spine. I stepped closer, studying the glass, but everything looked normal again, and I told myself the long day and the weather were playing tricks that I just needed rest. Though a quiet whisper inside me said, I already knew better. I should have walked away right then, but I stayed. What would you do if a mirror showed your future instead of your reflection? That first night with the mirror, I told myself I was being dramatic. I had always had that problem turning small feelings into thunder in my own head, so I brushed my teeth, changed into an old shirt, and moved around my apartment, trying not to look down the hallway where the mirror waited, patient and silent. Of course I failed. I carried my mug of tea to the hallway and leaned against the wall facing it. There was nothing supernatural about it. Not if you just glanced. The glass held my shape, the dim lights behind me, my narrow hallway, all the ordinary details of my ordinary life. But my heart kept beating a little too fast, like I was standing on the edge of something I could not see. I took a slow breath and stared into my own eyes in the mirror. You are tired? I told myself. You are lonely. You bought an unnecessary piece of furniture because it looked romantic and mysterious, and that is all. Only then something shifted. My reflection did not move right away. My chest rose and fell. But in the glass, my shoulders were still, my lips slightly parted, my eyes wider than I felt them to be. There was a pause, like the space between lightning and thunder, and then the girl in the mirror finally inhaled. I froze. The mug slipped from my fingers, hit the floor, and spilled tea everywhere. My reflection looked down at the mess a second before I did, and then she stepped backward while I stood completely still. That was impossible. I whispered no, out loud. Just that one word, and my voice sounded too loud in the narrow hallway. My reflection mouthed the same word, but late the syllable silent and slow. My knees nearly gave out. I pressed my hand to the wall and looked away, breathing too fast, trying to anchor myself. The sharp scent of the tea, the cool air on my bare legs, the faint hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. These were real things, solid things I could hold on to. When I looked back, the mirror was normal again. My reflection copied me perfectly the way it had my entire life. And for a moment, I wondered if I had imagined everything, if the long day at work and the heaviness in my chest had created my own private hallucination. I cleaned the floor. I avoided the hallway for the rest of the night. I slept badly. Morning came with pale light and a headache. I walked past the mirror holding my breath, but nothing happened. And for a while, it was easy to believe that maybe nothing ever had until the mirror tried to save me. It happened 3 days later on my way to work when I saw something in the glass that had not happened yet. In that moment, I stopped walking, and the world quietly shifted around the truth waiting for me. Would you keep the mirror or return it after the first warning? I remember that morning so clearly, even now, even after everything else has blurred around the edges. I had been rushing the way I always did, half-awake, toast in my mouth, keys somewhere in the wrong pocket, and my hair refusing to behave. The hallway was cool, the sunlight thin and sleepy, and I walked past the mirror without looking intentionally, deliberately, like a child pretending the monster under the bed couldn't see her if she didn't see it. But something in the corner of my eye caught me anyway. A flicker, a shift, a tiny motion that didn't belong to me, and before I could stop myself, I turned. My reflection wasn't rushing. She stood still, upright, expression tight with warning. Her hand lifting slowly as if trying to reach me through the glass, and her eyes weren't on my face. They were on the floor just behind my right foot. I looked down. There was nothing there, just the old rug I had been meaning to replace, and for a second I felt almost foolish, almost relieved, until the girl in the mirror suddenly stepped back, her face tightening in fear. Then she pointed. I spun around fast, and as I did, a small framed photo fell from the shelf beside me, the corner of it aimed perfectly at the spot where my ankle had been a moment earlier. It hit the wooden floor with a loud crack, smashing the glass inside. My breath stuttered. I stared at the broken frame, then at the mirror, then back again, trying to stitch together the pieces of reality inside my mind. The reflection had known. The reflection had warned me. The reflection had moved before I did. I knelt slowly, picking up the picture. It was one of my parents from years ago when they still smiled easily when the world felt softer. Somehow, seeing it cracked made my throat tighten in a way I didn't want to examine. I placed it aside gently and turned toward the mirror again. This time my reflection matched me perfectly, but there was something new in her eyes, a tension like she was waiting for me to understand something important. Something I was not ready to see. I whispered, "Thank you, though." My voice trembled and the girl in the mirror whispered it too, but the sound never reached me, her lips moving in silence. That was the moment I knew the mirror wasn't broken. The way you might fear an object is haunted or cursed. No, this felt different. It felt intentional, intelligent, aware. I left the apartment carefully watching every step until I reached the elevator, and even as I rode down to the lobby, I felt the weight of that silent warning pressing against my thoughts like a hand, guiding me gently but firmly forward. The mirror had saved me. Whatever it was, it didn't want to hurt me, not yet. Do you think the mirror is helping her or manipulating her? For the next few days, I tried so hard to pretend nothing strange was happening. I went to work. I answered emails. I ate dinner alone at my little table, scrolling through my phone like always, but every night, no matter how many times I told myself not to, I found my eyes drifting toward the hallway, toward the tall, silent mirror that seemed to breathe when the apartment grew quiet. I kept waiting for something else to happen, something dramatic, something terrifying, but the mirror stayed still, reflecting only what it was supposed to reflect. And I almost convinced myself that maybe the warning had been some strange coincidence. Maybe I had imagined the delay in my reflection. Maybe I was losing my mind in slow, gentle ways without realizing it, but deep down I knew better. The truth settled inside me like water in a deep bowl, silent but impossible to ignore. One night, I walked up to the mirror, slowly letting my toes curl against the cool floor, letting my breath move in and out the way you do. When you're about to open a door, you're not sure you should. I stood right in front of it, close enough that my breath fogged the lower edge of the glass. I studied every detail of my reflection, my tired eyes, my messy hair, my slightly crooked shirt collar. Everything looked normal, but mirrors lie quietly before they speak loudly. I reached out and touched the frame, my fingers brushing the carved lines that felt warm. Warmer than wood should feel after hours in a dark hallway, and something inside the mirror shivered just a little like a ripple under the surface of water, and my heart started beating too fast. Then it happened. At first it was subtle, my reflection's eyes drifting not toward mine, but toward the doorway behind me. I didn't move. I didn't turn around. I watched her instead. Watched the faint widening of her gaze, the fear slipping into it like a shadow stretching across a floor. Slowly she lifted her hand and pointed behind me. My shoulders tensed, but I couldn't move. I felt glued to the spot, my breath shallow, my skin prickling. But she kept pointing, urging me silently, her expression pleading. Finally, I turned my head just a little, and that small motion saved me again. The iron bar holding my hallway plant had loosened at the screws and was beginning to slide downward inch by inch, ready to fall exactly where the back of my skull had been. Just a moment before I stepped away quickly as it dropped, hitting the floor with a heavy thud. The pot rolling and spilling dirt everywhere, I spun back toward the mirror, trembling, but the reflection wasn't done. This time she didn't copy me, not at all. Instead, she stepped forward closer to the glass, her expression softening into something heartbreaking, because she wasn't warning me about something in the hallway anymore. She was warning me about someone, a man I didn't know, a future she had seen before I did. How would you react if you saw yourself hugging a stranger? I didn't understand it at first, only that the reflection wasn't looking at me anymore. She wasn't watching the hallway or pointing toward danger. She was staring into something far away, something I couldn't see, and her face shifted from fear to longing so gently it made my chest tighten. I stepped closer, whispering, "What are you trying to show me, though?" I knew she couldn't answer, not with sound, not with words. Then the glass changed. It didn't cloud or crack or darken the way mirrors do in movies. Nothing dramatic happened. The light stayed the same. The hallway stayed the same, but the reflection melted away as if she had stepped backward into some place I didn't have a map for, and another scene rose up inside the mirror. Soft and strange I saw myself, but not the me standing there. This version of me looked older by a little, maybe only by months, but she looked different in ways that were harder to measure. She had a softness in her eyes, a warmth in her shoulders, a steadiness in the way she held herself, and she was standing in a room I had never seen. Sunlight sliding through tall windows, dust sparkling in the air like tiny falling stars, and in her arms was a man I didn't know. He wasn't facing the mirror, so I couldn't see his whole face, only the shape of his shoulders, the curve of his neck, the dark waves of his hair, and the quiet way he held me like he was trying to keep the world from touching me. The way I clung to him told me everything I didn't want to read in my own expression. I was crying. Not softly either. I could see the shaking in my shoulders, the way my fingers curled into the fabric of his shirt. Desperate the way someone cries when something has broken inside them or when something precious has been found and they're afraid to lose it again. The man lifted a hand and touched my back gently, an anchor in the middle of whatever storm that moment belonged to. And even through the mirror, even through the glass, I felt something shift deep inside me like a door unlocking. Like a truth waking up. I gasped and stepped back, covering my mouth because I could feel it. I could feel the weight of that moment, even though it wasn't mine yet. Love lost, destiny, all braided together in a way that terrified me. The mirror wasn't warning me about danger this time. It was showing me a future I had not lived, a future that felt too intimate, too fragile, too heavy for me to understand. The reflection returned, slowly fading back into place with her eyes shining in a way that made me feel like she pitied me. And that was when the first memory slipped away. I felt it like a soft tug at the edge of my thoughts, a cold, empty space opening where something warm had lived before I reached for it desperately, but it was gone. Before I could catch its shape, I stared at the mirror, trembling, and whispered, "No, please, no." But the mirror didn't care. It had already taken its price. Do you believe destiny can be changed or is it fixed? I didn't notice which memory had vanished. Not at first, it was like waking up from a dream. You know you had but can't recall. No matter how tightly you close your eyes, I paced the hallway with my hands pressed against my temples, whispering, think, 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 as if I could force the missing piece back into place by sheer will alone, but the space in my mind stayed hollow and cold. Eventually, I sat on the floor, knees pulled up to my chest, staring at the mirror as if it might apologize, but mirrors don't care about apologies. They only show what they choose to show and take what they choose to take. I kept replaying the image of that man in my arms over and over, the way he held me, the way my reflection clung to him, the way her body folded into his, as if she had found something irreplaceable. It scared me how much it affected me, how deeply it carved into the quiet parts of my heart. I didn't even know we're awake. Why had I been crying? Why had he held me like that? Who was he? The questions burned through me until I finally stood and forced myself to walk away. I made tea. I cleaned the counter. I tried to fill my head with the ordinary rhythm of normal things, but the emptiness inside me pulsed like a bruise every few seconds, as if reminding me of the price I'd already paid. Later that night, something else shifted. I was brushing my teeth when I caught my own expression in the bathroom mirror and froze. There was something missing in my eyes, not something physical, more like a shadow that wasn't there anymore. A familiar sadness I had carried for so long that its absence felt wrong, like a missing tooth. My smile felt uneven, and for a moment I couldn't understand why I felt lighter and heavier at the same time. Then it hit me. I couldn't remember the sound of my mother's lullabies, the ones she used to sing when I was small, the ones I hummed sometimes when I couldn't sleep. I remembered her voice. I remembered her face, but the melody, the soft rhythm of it, the way it curled around me like a blanket had vanished completely. Tears stung my eyes. I pressed my hands to my mouth to keep the sound in, but it hurt so much because that lullaby had been the last thing she ever sang to me before she passed, and now it was gone like it had never existed. I stumbled back to the hallway, staring at the tall antique mirror in disbelief, fury rising in my chest so hot it made my vision blur. I whispered, "Give it back, give it back, give it back." But my reflection only stared at me silently, almost gently, as if she knew something I didn't, as if she believed the future she had shown me was worth the price. And that terrified me more than the memory loss itself, because a part of me, a tiny fragile part, wondered, what if she was right? Would you risk losing a memory to learn something about your future? The next morning felt strange in a way that clung to my skin like mist. I moved through my apartment, touching things almost tenderly, my bookshelf, my coffee mug, the faded photograph on the fridge, as if I needed to confirm they were still real, that I was still real. The missing lullaby echoed inside me like a silence too loud, and I kept trying to remember the melody humming, random notes hoping something familiar would spark awake. Nothing did. By afternoon, I found myself standing again in front of the mirror, even though every part of me knew I shouldn't get close to it, not after what it had already taken. The wood frame felt warmer than usual, pulsing faintly like a heartbeat, and the glass shimmered as if it were waiting for me. I whispered, "Please don't take anything this time." My voice barely a breath, but the mirror didn't answer. Of course it didn't. Still, I stepped forward. My reflection stared back at me, calm, steady, almost sympathetic, and for the first time I noticed something unsettling. She looked stronger than I felt, her eyes clearer, her posture firmer, like she carried a weight I hadn't lifted yet. It made me wonder if she knew every future moment I had yet to live, if she was holding all those pieces inside her while I stood here half-formed and trembling. Then the shift happened. Not like before, not dramatic, not immediate, but slow, like shadows stretching at sunset. My reflection tilted her head slightly and her gaze drifted downward. Not at my feet this time, but toward my hands. I looked down too confused until I saw it, a folded slip of paper resting on the floor near my toes. It hadn't been there before I was certain of it. My heart thumped painfully as I crouched to pick it up, my fingers shaking a little because nothing in my life had ever appeared out of nowhere, and yet here it was, fragile and real and waiting. The paper smelled faintly of cedar and dust. I unfolded it slowly, revealing handwriting I did not recognize, elegant and hurried all at once. "You don't know me yet, but you will, and when you do, please don't run. My throat tightened so quickly it almost hurt. I looked up at the mirror, my breath catching because my reflection was smiling, just barely a soft, sad smile that felt heavy with meaning. I whispered, "Who is he who is M?" But the reflection didn't change, didn't shift, didn't offer anything. All she did was watch me with that same expression, like she knew something inevitable was already moving toward me. I pressed the note against my chest, afraid it might dissolve if I let go. And in that moment, the mirror darkened briefly like a cloud passing over the sun, and I felt another memory tug loose from the edges of my mind. A birthday, one of mine, a cake with candles, a song, laughter gone. I gasped, gripping the doorframe as dizziness rolled through me, and when I looked at my reflection again, she looked almost apologetic, as if she had taken the memory with her own trembling hands. I whispered, why are you doing this?" And for the first time, my reflection's lips moved into a single silent word, soon. What memory would hurt the most to lose? I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the slip of paper, the hurried handwriting, the way my reflection had mouthed that single word, soon. It echoed through me like a quiet promise or a warning, and I wasn't sure which one it was meant to be. The missing birthday memory thrummed inside me like an empty drumbeat, and I kept pressing my palms to my temples as if I could force the space to fill itself again. It didn't. By morning, I felt wrung out, hollowed out like someone had reached into my mind and scooped out pieces with careful hands. I expected the mirror to feel colder, or darker, or more threatening, but instead it waited in the hallway, the same way it always had, tall and silent. And watching, I should have stayed away from it. I know that, but I didn't. Because the note was still on my nightstand, and every few minutes, I found myself glancing toward it, whispering M out loud, letting the letter sit on my tongue the way a future might taste before you live it. That tiny scrap of paper made the world feel tilted, like something was pulling me toward a place I didn't understand yet. After work, I stood in front of the mirror again, afraid and wanting and desperate for answers. My reflection watched me closely, her eyes softer than mine, almost tender, as if she pitied me for not knowing what she knew. I whispered, "Show me, please show me more." The moment the words left my lips, the glass quivered. The hallway behind me blurred, then softened, then dissolved, and a new scene swelled up through the mirror like ink spreading in water. I held my breath as shapes formed, light blooming around them until I saw myself again, but not the me standing there. The future me sat on a bench in some quiet sunlit park, her hands trembling slightly, a letter clutched between her fingers. Then he appeared, the man. The stranger from the earlier vision, but clearer this time. I could see his face, strong jaw, warm eyes, hair that curled a little at the ends. He looked at me, the future me, with so much tenderness. I felt it in my own chest. He approached slowly, as if afraid she might break, and when she lifted her head, her eyes were full of tears. Tears I could almost feel. He sat beside her, their knees touching gently, and he reached for her hand, like he'd done it 1,000 times, like he belonged there. The moment his fingers curled around hers, something in the air crackled a pull, a connection sharp enough to sting inside my ribs. Future me leaned into him the way a tired soul leans into safety, and he wrapped his arm around her, resting his cheek on her hair, holding her like she was the only fragile thing in a world full of storms. My breath hitched. I wanted to look away, but I couldn't. This wasn't fear. This wasn't danger. This was something else entirely. Something deep. Something impossible. Something that felt like destiny, but then I felt it. A tear in my mind. A thread snapping. A memory sliding away before I could reach for it. I clutched my head, my knees buckling as my reflection watched helplessly. And when the pain eased, when the cold emptiness opened inside me again, I whispered in a shaking voice, "What did you take this time?" My reflection lowered her gaze, unable to answer, but the hollow ache in my chest told me everything. It had taken the last memory I had of my father's voice. "Do you think the stranger can be trusted?" I didn't leave my apartment for hours after that. The world outside felt too bright, too loud, too full of voices I couldn't bear to hear, when my own father's voice had been erased from me like chalk wiped from a board. I tried to remember it. I tried so hard. I whispered phrases I knew he had said to me over the years, hoping the sound of my own voice would spark something familiar, but nothing came. It was like shouting into a canyon, expecting an echo that would never return. I collapsed onto the couch, clutching a pillow to my chest, trembling with a grief so sharp I could barely breathe. I kept thinking, why him? Why that? Why? Something so precious. But the answer pulsed quietly from the hallway where the mirror waited like a heartbeat in the dark. Because you asked. Because you wanted more. Because everything has a price. And part of me hated the mirror for it, hated its silent watching, hated the way it manipulated my heart like a puppet on strings. But another part of me, the part still holding that slip of paper, marked with an initial M, felt something else. Something warmer. Something tugging me forward, even while the losses pulled me back. I stared at the note again, tracing the single letter with my fingertip, M. Who was he? What would he mean to me? Why did the future version of myself cling to him, like he was the only safe place left in the world? I didn't want to care. I didn't want to believe. But I did. Somewhere deep inside the ache and the fear and the anger, there was a thread pulling me toward him the way the moon pulls the tide even when the water resists. As the sky darkened outside, I felt the mirror calling again, soft, almost gentle, like a hand brushing my shoulder. I stood because I couldn't resist anymore, because some strange gravity tied to fate itself kept pulling me back toward that antique frame. I walked down the hallway, slowly each step, echoing in my chest, and the moment I faced the mirror, the glass stirred. My reflection looked at me with so much sorrow it made my throat close a little, like she had been carrying the weight of every memory I had lost and wanted to give them back but couldn't. Then her expression changed, her eyes sharpening with urgency as if time had thinned and something important was about to snap. Suddenly she lifted her hand, pressing her palm against the glass, and I felt a jolt pulse through the air like a hum vibrating inside my bones. She leaned forward and mouthed something, one word, one name, Milo. My breath caught. I whispered it out loud, letting the name settle in my mouth. Milo? It felt warm somehow, familiar in a place I didn't understand yet. Then the world inside the mirror shifted again and I saw myself running down a street. Rain pouring in silver sheets, my hair plastered to my face, my chest heaving, my hands shaking as if I were searching for something, someone. And at the end of the street, standing under a flickering lamppost, was him, Milo, the stranger, the man, the future. I wasn't ready to meet but was already falling into the moment my eyes locked with his in the mirror vision. Another memory tore loose inside me, leaving me breathless on my knees, the name of my childhood best friend. Gone in an instant, I sobbed into my hands, whispering, "Stop, please, stop." But the mirror only watched, calm, patient, almost loving, as if saying, there is no stopping destiny. Should she destroy the mirror or keep using it? I don't know how long I stayed on the floor, knees pressed into the cold wood palms, hiding my face, letting the grief roll through me in waves that felt endless. The mirror had taken so much pieces of my childhood, pieces of my parents, pieces of myself, and yet when I finally lifted my head, the first thing I did was whisper his name again. Milo. It slipped out of me like breath, like something I had always known, even though I had never heard it before. The note, the visions, the way my reflection looked at me with that mix of sorrow and hope. It all circled inside my thoughts until I felt dizzy. The mirror kept showing me the same truth over and over. I wasn't supposed to run from him. I was supposed to find him. But every time I got closer, every time the mirror nudged me toward that future, it took something precious in return. I stood slowly steadying myself with a wall and walked to the mirror one last time. My reflection mirrored me perfectly again, but her eyes glowed with something heavy, something final, as if she knew this was the moment everything would hinge on. I whispered, "Why Milo? Why him? Why me?" And for a moment I thought she might answer, but she didn't. Instead, the glass shimmered like light on water, and the scene inside changed. One last time I saw myself sitting on a hospital bed, pale, exhausted eyes red from crying. Milo beside me holding my hand so tightly his knuckles were white, his forehead pressed against my shoulder like he was afraid to lose me too. The future me leaned into him, whispering something I couldn't hear, and he nodded, breaking open in front of her like someone who had finally found the person they were meant to protect. Then the scene shifted again, and I saw us in a kitchen. Sunlight streaming through wide windows, flour on the counter and on my cheeks. Milo laughing while brushing it off with his thumb. His eyes warm and full of something so deep, so real, it made my whole chest ache. Then again, a new image me, in a park leaning against him, reading a book while his arm curled around my waist like it belonged there. Like I belonged there too. Then again, a final image me, older hair, longer eyes, softer, standing inside a dim hallway, holding the same note I held now, pressing it to my heart as tears fell. And Milo behind me, wrapping his arms around my shoulders, whispering something against my ear, something I couldn't hear but somehow understood: love, loss, fate, choice. It was all connected. The mirror wasn't punishing me, it was preparing me. My reflection stepped forward, pressing her palm to the glass, urging me silently, and I knew what she was asking. I knew what the mirror wanted, what the future demanded. If I wanted the life it showed me, the love waiting for me, I would have to give something more than memories. I would have to give trust. I placed my palm against the glass, letting the warmth flow through me. My breath trembling out of my lungs, I whispered, "I'm ready." Not knowing what would happen, not knowing what else I would lose, not knowing if Milo would be worth all the pieces the mirror had taken. But as the glass warmed beneath my skin, as the reflection smiled softly, the way someone smiles when a journey finally begins, I felt something ease inside me, a small, quiet certainty settling into my bones. He would be worth it. Every memory, every loss, every step. When the vision faded, my reflection mouthed two last words silently, gently, like a promise: find him. And I knew I would. No matter what the mirror had taken, no matter what it might still take, I would find him, because somehow he was already finding me. What do you think the final price of the mirror will be?